Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is Lloyd Princeton with Design Management Company, and appreciate people joining in on a Thursday afternoon as we are getting summer started around the country. And certainly, what a fascinating time in our industry. Interesting how something very positive in many respects could happen particularly for the residential design community, born out of what in many respects has been tragic for certain families. The pandemic, on the flip side though, has been a very good business opportunity, and with that has come some inherent problems. A lot of supply chain issues that design professionals are facing right now. And, amongst those resources are including human resources. So I thought it would be timely to address this issue from a human resource perspective, because that is what I do from day to day. And as those of you who are dialing in, you're probably aware, I have a 25-year history in the industry on the consulting side. Dealing with businesses, marketing, contract negotiations, some sales distribution, done a variety of things. But really over the last almost going on decade now, I focused on recruiting and staffing. And as such, it has been an absolutely crazy time right now because, pre-pandemic, it was already tight. It was, really good talent was hard to come by and is starting to get a little more expensive. And now as we're segueing out of the pandemic, it's gotten much worse. And in fact, I was just reading an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal that describes this particular market as a candidates market. So I'm assuming I have mostly employers on the call, but I may very well have candidates on the call. And given that we're in this very unique situation, given the fact that it's very hard to find people to join design teams, given the fact that a lot of design teams are already stretched to the max and are getting even more projects, as one client in Connecticut said, it's like drinking from a fire hose. They have so much work coming in, and it doesn't look like it's abating anytime soon, which is good, from a business perspective, but it's bad from a human resource perspective. So, without further ado, today we want to share with you in very quick succession some perspectives on employee retention, and then I have my wonderful colleague Julia Nikishina from New Age Financial, who's also going to speak to financial components of this from an accounting perspective and the work that she has been doing with residential design firms around the country. And hopefully between the two of us, we will give you some insights that will be of value to you. There will be time for Q&A. We're not going to ramble on too long. And then, and I plan on having this over in about 35 minutes or so. And then there will be an audio recording. So don't fret if you're driving or not be able to take really fast notes. Okay. Without further ado, from a human resource and from a staffing perspective, there are a number of things that you can do to keep the current employees that you have and keep them happy. Because remember, a lot of employers are out there circling, looking for new talent, which means they very well may come across your people. And I have a list of 8 things. At the top of the list, but by no means the most important, is compensation. It's certainly a very good time for you to take a look at what you are paying people and make sure that your staff is being paid at the market. Because when people feel that they're being underpaid, it certainly can be enticing when someone else comes along and offers them more. Now, compensation packages are just that. They're packages. They are not comprised of just a base salary or commission or bonus, all of which I have design firms doing, but also Benefits. Benefits are an extremely important component, and interestingly enough, they have become more important, I would say, over the last year or two with a lot of design professionals. They want to work for a firm, but they also want to receive benefits. And I am going to give you an alternative if you currently don't offer something. I'm going to share something, but I do want you to know that one of the things I hear from a lot of employers is, we're just a small business. We know we don't offer, we can't afford to offer. But just to give you perspective, I have a client in San Francisco, for instance, that is probably about 10 to 12 people on staff. They offer a annual profit sharing bonus. They also offer a 401k with a 4% match. They also give a monthly health care contribution for a plan they've pulled together, free gym membership, reimbursement for professional dues and approved classes, phone reimbursement up to $100 or a phone provided, and then a number of safety protocols that they've done. They are also offering a very generous contribution towards relocation in case people need to come in. So that's just to give you a perspective. And this by no means is unusual now. I'm starting to see more and more design firms of 10 employees or less with comprehensive benefits packages with, not always 100% healthcare paid by the employer, but certainly something offered. Now, having said that, if you don't currently offer anything because you just don't want to go through the expense, if you at least offer voluntary benefits that the employee can pay for, you're at least moving in the right direction. So what that means is that you reach out to various benefits programs and try to take advantage of a group discount, and you go take the effort to coordinate it under your firm and then make it available to your employees. Having said that, for my clients that don't offer anything, I often just say, listen, if you at least can make a $250 a month contribution towards medical, that's at least something. And frankly, more often than not, that makes a difference, okay? Next in line, which is a super important one, is time off. I'm still surprisingly seeing firms offer, actually I've had people come to me and even offer 1 week vacation to people starting out, which I think is crazy. 2 weeks vacation is a minimum, and then often they'll do sick days plus holidays. But if you really want to be competitive, I would recommend that you make everything PTO, for personal time off. So instead of offering 2 weeks plus sick days, when possible, try to make it maybe 15 days of PTO, group it together. Unless you're in a region where they mandate that you offer sick days, then you can kind of take that in consideration. Many of my clients will close the week of Christmas and not deduct that from time off. So just to do a quick recap, you might minimally want to offer 2 weeks vacation, probably close the last week of the year, so now they're up to 3 weeks, and if necessary and required by law, you may have to offer several days of sick time as well. So that's almost pushing 20 days. And frankly, that's what most firms are doing. So, and also people really want quality of life. They want to have the ability to work and take time off. One of the holdovers from the pandemic, which I'm seeing more of, but by no means absolute, is remote work. I would say majority of my clients, and I'm going to say better than 80%, are back to work in the office working in person. So don't feel that it's, if anyone's telling you otherwise, it's certainly not what I'm seeing. I think that you could offer some sort of hybrid. Do people need to come into the office 5 days a week? Probably not. Can they come in 3 days a week? Maybe 2? Sure. And if you're in a high traffic area like San Francisco Bay Area or Los Angeles or New York, they may, and they have chosen to move outside of the city, they may really appreciate the option of not having to come into the office every day. Anyway, that actually, the remote seems to be the less frequent for what it's worth. Then here's another one which is not discussed often, but I put it down on the list because I think it's relevant. And that is, what kind of work environment are you nurturing in your space. I have this because I was recently working with a client in Dallas, Texas, and this is not an uncommon scenario, but they have a very domineering employee on staff, and that person makes a lot of people unhappy. And yet the owner of the firm just feels attached to them and feels that they, are critical to the team. Well, is that really the best thing for your team if they're making the rest of the team unhappy? And that just kind of goes into the work environment too. What contributions are you making to the work environment with your own behavior? Are you guys doing, any kind of, parties or monthly parties or a little Friday happy hour? What are you doing to make the work environment more pleasant so that people really enjoy being there? And that's not to say they need to be catered to and handheld and, avoiding the work, but you can make it more pleasant. And that is really critical. People pay attention to it. Last two items, sabbaticals. For your employees who are seniors who have been there for a while, I think you should definitely discuss the option of giving them some sort of sabbatical. Let them take some time off in addition to the time off they're going to do. Maybe it's a study abroad trip. It may sound crazy, but it doesn't have to be exceedingly expensive. I mean, and if you give someone a month off, depending upon what they're comped at, that is much less expensive than recruiting fees or having to, replace somebody. And we can certainly talk about the expenses associated with replacing people. But last but not least, if you've had people there who have been there for a while, and I would say more than 5 years, maybe going on 10, or if they're a senior to your team, you probably want to be discussing some sort of partnership path. It doesn't have to be control of the firm, but many firms that I have worked with and certainly am aware of have promoted their key people into partnership roles, which is a great form of golden handcuffs, if you will. Really gives them incentive to stay because now they're working for their own futures and not just yours. Even though the name on the door still may be yours or whatever it currently is, partnership is a great way to keep people engaged and once again working hard towards what they do. And these are certainly all things that I've worked with on a consultative basis, and I think there's also some really good examples of it already out in the environment, particularly in the New York market. I don't know, for whatever reason, a number of New York firms have seemed to embrace that. So I'm going to stop on that note because I'm sure there's more to discuss, but I also want you to hear from another and wonderful talented voice. So without further ado, I invite Julia Nikishina with New Age Financial Consulting. And I'm going to let her take a moment just to introduce herself and what she does. But I'll say I've had the pleasure of working with Julia, and we have collaborated on top New York design firm together. And, she works with the best and is very good at what she does. So, Julia, welcome aboard.
Lloyd, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, this is Julia.
Oh, okay, Julia, it's your turn. Jump in.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm not sure if that was on my end. I'm sure that it was. Thank you again for having me. So just a quick background about myself and our firm. We are an outsourced accounting and procurement firm. Like you mentioned, we work with many firms in New York and LA and all across the country. Designers range large and small. Our goal is to really have the designers focus on what they do best, which is obviously the interior design component, and really allow us to focus on the accounting and help them, assist them with any type of procurement that they need as well. I'd like to piggyback on some of your points in terms of hiring and keeping employees, especially in this current market, and then just briefly talk about outsourcing. And why potentially that could be a fit for some of the firms out there today. One of the things I think you did mention is flex time. I think it's so, in the world that we live in, especially nowadays after post-COVID, I think that is critical in the workplace, but harder for the interior design field. So much of what they do is hands-on and they're feeling and seeing and textures and all the resources aren't always available to them at home. But I am seeing firms be flexible. They are offering some sort of flex time to their staff. So whether they're doing maybe 3 days in the office and 2 days work from home, or 4 days in the office, and 1 day work from home, I think they are realizing that, like you mentioned, the employees would like to live a life that's on their terms to a degree, and really allowing them, if they need to be on site, then they need to be on site. But if there's work that can be done from home, that they are able to do it from home. I think something else that is really interesting and that's becoming more popular is joining a PEO, which is a professional employer organization. And it allows smaller firms to, you pay into a PEO and you're able to benefit from more competitive health care costs. There's a lot of different PEOs out there. You definitely need to do your research and make sure that you're joining the one that you feel most comfortable with. But in terms of health care, it's a place where, as an employer, you could be more competitive with a better price point. So you could provide different levels of coverage to your employees, even if you have, let's say, 3 or 4 employees. So definitely something for firms to explore. It does become a little bit tricky in terms of if you need some quarterly payroll returns, like a 941 or something like that. I mean, there's definitely research that needs to be done. But if healthcare has been maybe a burden or an obstacle for you because there's only 2 or 3 people in a small group and costs the last couple of years have been skyrocketing, it is something to explore. I think lastly, the one thing to mention is, when do you evaluate, or how do you evaluate if you should outsource any part of the work? And obviously people outsource CAD, and in some scenarios people could outsource procurement. You could outsource your accounting. I'm a big believer in leaving the experts do what the experts do. So I would never take on any type of legal challenge. I would always outsource that to an attorney and ask for their professional assistance. The same for me holds true in accounting. I'd rather have the designer not focus on reconciliations or managing the financials, but be still very, very involved and understand your reports, understand your financials, understand your profitability, understand your projects, and work with a trusted team and a trusted advisor to help navigate the business and the business growth. When you're hiring for accounting and procurement, in terms of hiring them full-time, that could be incredibly, incredibly pricey. And depending on the size of your firm, I think that's too where people need to make a decision. If you're a 15, 20, 25-person firm, it may make sense to invest over 6 figures and bring somebody on full-time. But if you are not, then that's the time to really see how many hours are you putting in, or how many hours is somebody on staff putting in, and are they really of the right caliber? And that holds true, again, for procurement, like a procurement director, for an accounting director, director of finance. And we're seeing more and more firms outsource, again, in those two areas. The designer workflow really ebbs and flows, so I think that goes into the consideration with procurement as well, and accounting as well. As you mentioned, Lloyd, it's been a really interesting and bizarre 2020 and 2021. I mean, our projections for our clients are off the charts this year. And I do agree with you. I think they will continue that way. And with purchasing volumes increasing and staff being difficult to obtain, I think it's a great question for firms to evaluate.
Julia, let me ask you to elaborate on something. I'm interested in what in the outsourcing, and you talked about if there's a certain minimum number of hours, or maybe it's a maximum number of hours. Is there any kind of rule or thumb, or how are you helping your clients evaluate? And let's take an example. Let's say it's CAD drawings. Maybe try to keep it on the simple side. At what point? What is the barometer, or what bar do they have to cross before you decide, now it's time to hire somebody full time?
I always look at revenue. I like to look at gross revenue, and I like to look at hours. So I like to look at both. And then all firms work differently in terms of billing. Can you, for example, subcontract CAD hours and pay somebody $125 an hour, but bill that person out at $175, not have to worry about their benefit package whatsoever, and still make a pretty hefty margin on somebody's time? So I think every situation is going to be a little bit differently, but there's definitely some baseline conversation and some baseline questions that can be had with each firm to understand how they bill and how they work with their clients to determine if it's the right fit. And that goes for procurement. Procurement's the same. If you could pay somebody $75 an hour but bill those same hours out at $150 or $175, and you don't have to hire somebody on staff. You don't have to find someone. You don't have to pay their benefits. You don't have to worry about their PTO or tracking their sick time and all the other rules that vary state by state. It really can be a win-win.
Sounds good. These also sound like some pretty high hours that you're paying people for CAD and procurements. It seems a lot higher than what I've been observing from design firms, but I guess you get what you pay for.
And I think I think I'm talking more about on the LA and the New York side of the countries, right? There's obviously a really large range in the middle, everywhere else, but LA and New York are higher than most.
Understood. Anything else you want to offer before I open this up to questions?
No, I don't think anything specifically. I just think, like you mentioned, it's a really great, regardless of everything that's happened, what a way for this industry to really benefit from something, and I really hope make an impact in the long term.
No, and I appreciate that. And by the way, to speaking of outsourcing, obviously as a recruiter, is there a rule of thumb? Should you try it on your own? And my response is no, never. It's a dangerous thing. Never recruit yourself. No, if you have time, go ahead and post some ads and do what you're going to do. But don't wait until the last minute. If you are really busy with projects and you need to get people on board, then bite the bullet and pay the recruiting fees, because good candidates are really, for the most part, not necessarily looking. They have to be found proactively. And that's where so if you have the time to really dive in and do the work, then do it yourself. But if you don't, or you don't have somebody on your staff that can do it for you, then you're going to need to recruit, and you're going to need to allow 30 to 60 days minimum for the process. So the time to panic is not when the project walked in the door and they're ready to get started. You want to try to be as forward-thinking as you can and allow as long as you can for the process, because even start to finish to get a signed offer can easily be 30 to 45 days. And then what if they have to give notice, or what if they have to relocate? Then you tack that on top of it. So, for a really good candidate, you may have to wait 60 to 90 days. So I would just offer that as a potential outsourcing, timeline for what you're doing. So without further ado, let's see, do we have any questions? Questions from anybody about retention, recruiting, or the dollars and cents around that? Okay, sounds like we've been very effective, or boring, one of the two. Julie, is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
No, I think you've covered everything.
Okay. In terms of, I will just put something out in terms of recruiting. For those of you who are doing it on your own, there are many different ad forums. You have you can do ads on LinkedIn, you can do ads on Indeed, Business of Home, interior design magazines online, interior design, Job Zone, ASID, IIDA, AIA. Everybody has multiple job banks. I don't believe you need to canvas all of them. But once again, remember, because if somebody's actually looking, they're going to go to the big ones. They're going to look at Indeed. They're going to look at LinkedIn. But that's if they're looking. And I will say most of the placements that we do are not people who are looking. It's people that we find. which means that we're proactively going into databases and actually finding people. So having said that, you don't need to place multiple ads if you're taking the passive approach. So just my 2 cents on that. So that's those are my insights. The recording will be made available on our website by tomorrow, and I'm just going to give one more chance. Did anyone think of a last-minute question that they would like to ask to either Julie or myself vis-a-vis accounting or the actual retention? Okay. Y'all made it very easy. So I hope everybody has a great afternoon, and please feel free to correspond if there's anything that we can do for you. Julia's information is on the website, and we'll be both happy to answer questions. Thanks very much, and Julia, thank you very much for your time. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.